Hi guys, Totallydubbed here, and today I'm doing a video review on the Sony HT-G700 soundbar. Now this 3.1 channel Dolby Atmos / DTSX soundbar can be found for around £450 in the UK and around $500 in the US. If you live in these territories or indeed elsewhere, the locally link in the description below will take you to your localized Amazon store. Also in the description you'll find other suggestions which I'll be referencing to throughout this review, so be sure to check out for my other alternatives to this soundbar. Now before jumping into this video, if you do have Instagram, I'd very much appreciate a follow. It's at TotallyDubbed, it'll be on your screen right now and indeed in the description. So without further ado, let's get into this review. So first off, let's talk about the build quality and design of the soundbar. What I like that Sony have done over here, they've done a metal grille all the way at the front of the soundbar, whilst at the top there's some sort of material which is somewhat reminiscent of some of their headphones. Now at the top over here you've got touch sensitive buttons, and I'm truthfully not a fan of them. I would have preferred physical buttons, but your mileage may vary, you might prefer them. Now there's an LED indicator there on the soundbar and a small little indicator on the subwoofer. You'll be pleased to know that these indicators can be fully disabled or dimmed via the remote, which I'll showcase in just a bit. Now in terms of the subwoofer itself, it's wireless between the soundbar itself and the subwoofer. You can see in terms of the positioning of the subwoofer, it looks slightly different than others in the market. You can see a forward-facing driver over there and a woofer port as well. And you will need to make sure it's connected to power. So it is wireless, but still doesn't need power. I know that might be quite obvious to some, but I just thought to mention it. Now moving on to the remote, it is very slender as you can see over here, and I do like what Sony have done. They've made it really compact but yet plentiful in terms of controls. You can see there's actually quite a lot of buttons over here. It might be overwhelming, but once you get used to them it's actually pretty comprehensive. At the top you've got the on and off and inputs, which are pretty obvious. Then you've got the surround sound modes, so you've got the immersive AE, you've got the auto, standard, cinema and music modes. I personally like using the soundbar on standard mode, despite if it's cinematic or music content. Standard seemed to result in, it gave me better results. The immersive AE, I'll get into that in just a bit. In terms of the volume itself, you've got it over here. You can of course synchronize it with your TV remote. You've got subwoofer levels as well. I usually leave it at around 8. It's got 12 different increments that you can choose from, which is great. The dimmer function, which I mentioned before, as you can see over here, it goes to dark and then now it's off. After about 10 seconds of it being idle, that illumination at the back will go, so we'll just let that do it in the background. Then over here the plus and minus buttons goes through different settings. Then over here you can see that you've got the menus if you want to enter them. Then you've got the audio, voice and night, and these ones basically show you what the mode is in terms of audio modes. The voice gives you more voice clarity, so if you watch a lot of news or podcasts, that's something you might want to enable. And night mode, as the name might suggest, is tailored for a nighttime viewing, so therefore reduces the bass and the overall immersion of the soundbar. Now next up is connectivity. It's pretty simple. You've got HDMI in and HDMI out. The out is ARC and eARC compatible, so for those who have a compatible TV. You've got USB, but that's for service / upgrade, and you've got Toslink as well. It's also worth bearing in mind this does have Bluetooth, and I was pleased to see that the AAC and SBC codecs were supported over Bluetooth, so you can wirelessly stream via the soundbar, and it works flawlessly, at least with my Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus. And now we get on to the most important part, the actual sound quality. Now I'm going to give you a demo, which obviously isn't ideal because it's via my camera and a microphone, and furthermore compressed via YouTube, so the best experience would be for you to hear it in person. But as we're doing a YouTube review, I should give you somewhat of a little clip as to how it sounds. Now for this I've used my friend's song. It's called Falling and can be found in the description below. Make sure you give it a like and subscribe.
Yeah, when I reach the brink, don't stop to think. I always sing, and now I'm falling again. Next thing you know, I'm crawling, I'm crawling, my way falling from so high, falling from so in. I'm always hoping, but when I reach the thing I always sing, and now I'm falling again. Next thing you know,
So there we have Priya's song. Hopefully you enjoyed it as much as I did. And I did flick through the different sound modes of the soundbar as well, and it was annotated at the bottom. If you'd missed that, then just rewind for you to give a little bit of an idea. So now in terms of my subjective opinion, how does this £450/$500 soundbar sound like? Well, I've reviewed quite a few different soundbars, and I must say this Sony soundbar took me by surprise, in a bad way. Now, I'll explain throughout this frequency range and then give you an indication of how it sounds on the whole. First off, in terms of sub bass, I was pleasantly surprised that the subwoofer does deliver a low-end rumble. It does cut off, and therefore I would say around the 45 Hz range does feel like it tails off, so it's not going to give you that pronounced low-end rumble. As I mentioned at the beginning of the review, I have the SW set at around 8 out of 12. It depends on your room's acoustics, and of course you might tailor it to the best of your experience for your own room, so that's completely subjective. But at least in terms of the objective value of this, I will say that the subwoofer does a okay job. It could be a little bit better, specifically in comparison to, for example, a JBL soundbar that really does extend lower than this, at least to my ears. Then, you know, if you want bass, then look for the JBL instead. In terms of the mid bass, here I was impressed because the Sony does produce a really tight and pronounced bass line. It doesn't sound over bloated and a little bit wobbly, while some of its competitors do fail in that respect. In terms of the mid-range, I do think it's good with the vocal mode enabled, and therefore if you're listening to vocals, for example on Priya's song, the vocals do come out a lot more predominantly when you have the voice mode enabled, However, with that disabled, the voice sounds subdued and it just doesn't come out as clear. Of course, you don't want to use it on voice mode all the time because you might not be listening to content with just purely vocals. So as such, in this respect, the mid-range does feel subdued and pushed back. It's to be expected at this price range, but I was expecting a little bit more from Sony specifically because, as far as I'm aware, they're pretty well renowned for producing good mid-range, specifically in their soundbars. Moving on to the highs, they did produce a good, decent extension at the top end. They didn't sound too sibilant or harsh to the ears, and equally just gave you that sort of excitement that you'd want. Now here comes the real kicker for me. It came to do with the Soundstage. Now first off, I should state that I connected it over HDMI, I played over YouTube, I watched terrestrial TV, I put some transformers as well to test out its Dolby credentials in terms of Dolby Atmos and if it properly picked up the Dolby signal, and as such, yes it did. There was no issues there with it picking it up and therefore producing a Dolby Atmos content. The issue over here is that we've got no sidewards or upward firing speakers. So how could this soundbar really do Dolby Atmos properly? Well, Sony have a 3.1 channel, well 3 channels on the soundbar, and therefore claimed it has got a vertical type of sound. The result of this, be it from Dolby Atmos or not, was truly terrible. The imaging of the Sony soundbar is by far one of the worst I've heard. In fact, soundbars which cost around $80 to $100, for example, far outclass this Sony soundbar, and that's not really exaggerating. I was truly shocked at how bad the imaging and the tonality was of this Sony soundbar. It feels as if it's been tuned for a higher number of drivers and positioning, whilst the sound has just been completely lost and jumbled. I thought there was actually something wrong with my setup. I unplugged it, I changed the HDMI cable. I know it sounds pretty basic, but sometimes that could be an issue, even though I use this with my own soundbar. And I even then use Bluetooth because, well, why not? I'm testing it out, and in case there's something there with the HDMI connection, then let's use Bluetooth as a failsafe. No matter what mode I used, no matter what setting I had, or no matter how I had it connected, the soundbar just sounded odd. It sounded completely off. Now, you might think I'm being a bit more critical, specifically if you're watching this and you have the soundbar, and you might be thinking, what is this guy on about? Well, I can tell you, for someone who's heard over 300 audio-related devices, reviewed, let alone heard, there's over 500 different audio-related devices I've heard, and this was one of the first products in terms of TV audio that really got me surprised as to like, what is going on over here? Why would someone pay £450 to $500? Now maybe I'm laying it a bit too much into it because it did relatively well throughout the frequency range, but the Soundstage is really badly done. I think that Sony have done some weird things, be it from how it's handling the metadata to how the drivers are trying to position themselves towards Dolby Atmos. It feels as if this soundbar has a lot of potential, but then it's being held back by its own design, be it from Sony's design or from the shell of the soundbar itself. What I'm trying to say over here is that the imaging and tonality, which are two things which you would normally expect to be pretty much a given with any sort of audio related device, was not the case with the Sony soundbar. In terms of the soundstage itself, as in terms of the width, the depth, and the almost sort of immersion that you get, it's just not there. It feels really center weighted. The center channels really do come out as much. And yes, that does include using the immersive AE mode on the soundbar settings, or be it using cinema, standard, or music, or even the auto mode, just for the sake of throwing it in there. Every single mode I used, it just felt it was really center weighted. In Transformers, the explosions and the sounds coming from left and right just sounded like they were coming through the center channel. Any sort of dialogue that was coming through was kind of feeling like it was being put over the center channel, where you have some of the explosions coming through as well. It just was a nightmare to actually listen to and actually enjoy. I just didn't enjoy listening to music, watching movies, or even watching terrestrial TV. So this basically led me to think that this Sony soundbar just really isn't good. I really didn't want to come with this review being super negative, because it does a lot of good in terms of its design, its build quality, in terms of connectivity, in terms of its options, from eARC, for example, which is relatively rare at this price range, to its remote control, and even to its overall sound frequency range. It's actually decent in terms of sound. But when it comes to the fundamental basis of Dolby Atmos, DTS:X, which is two things that they're really shouting about, and furthermore Soundstage, which really comes hand in hand with those two type of metadatas and sound processing, that was not the case with this Sony soundbar. And I can truly urge you to look at the different alternatives that I've posted down in the description below. Samsung, JBL, Sharp even, all offer better sound, and neither of them are all perfect, but they all are better in every single way than this Sony soundbar, in terms of sound, that is. So that is my honest, unbiased, unpaid review. I'm not paid by any manufacturer before someone thinks about it, and I'm not endorsed by Sony to do this review. I mean, who would endorse this negative review about it? But anyway, my point is that you should avoid this soundbar, look elsewhere, and if you want suggestions, then the ones in the description below would be my honest personal picks if I were to buy a soundbar at this price range. So hopefully you enjoyed this review. If you have, make sure you give it a like, subscribe if you want to see more, and favorite and share, as it always helps me to continue delivering this honest content. Alright guys, I've been Totally Dubbed. Take care, and bye bye.